Let's be honest, we hear a lot about corporate training, but in a world just packed with it, how do you create learning that actually delivers a real measurable return? Well, we're going to dive in and figure that out.
Oh yeah, we've all seen some version of this cartoon. You know the feeling. The eye rolls, the free coffee that's just okay, the sense that this is just another box that HR needs to tick. But what if it could be different? What if learning at work could actually be, transformative for both you and the company?
Okay, so to figure all that out, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll get our definitions straight, training versus development. Then, we'll look at the blueprint for how great programs are built. We'll compare where learning happens, dive into how to actually prove its value, and finally, the really important part, making sure that new knowledge doesn't just, disappear a week later.
All right, first things first, we really need to be clear about what we're even talking about here. The words training and development, they get thrown around all the time, often like they're the same thing. But trust me, they are fundamentally different.
So training. Think of training as the how-to. It's very specific. It's a systematic process for learning a skill for a particular task you need to do, like right now. Learning a new piece of software, or maybe a new sales script. It's immediate, it's short-term, and it's all about the task at hand.
Development, on the other hand, well, that's the long game. This is about acquiring skills and behaviors that build up your overall professional toolkit, your personal growth over a long period of time. This isn't just about one task. This is about your entire career path.
And this table just lays it all out perfectly. Training is a sprint, it's short-term, focused on today, and it's a means to an end, getting a task done. Development is a marathon. It's long-term, focused on tomorrow, and it's really an end in itself, your holistic growth. One is for the job you have, the other is for the career you want.
So if we want that long-term development, how do we build programs that actually get us there? Well, I'll tell you this. Great learning doesn't just happen by accident. It is carefully engineered, and there's a pretty deliberate process behind it.
Basically, every effective program follows these 4 logical stages. You have to start with a needs analysis. What problem are we actually trying to solve here? Then you design the learning experience to fix that problem. After that, you put it into operation. And here's the crucial final step, evaluation. Did it actually work? This creates a powerful feedback loop that makes sure your learning is always on target. Now, a huge part of that design process is deciding where the learning is supposed to happen. Should it be right there in the thick of your daily work, or do you need to step away from it all? This gets us to that classic debate, on-the-job versus off-the-job training.
What's really interesting here is the trade-off. On-the-job training is amazing because it's directly relevant, it's usually cheaper, and you can apply what you learn like that same afternoon. But off-the-job training gives you a focused environment, free from all those job distractions, with expert teachers and a chance to network. So neither one is just better. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve.
So, when we talk about on the job, what does that actually look like? Well, we're talking about things like coaching from your manager, having a long-term mentor, maybe rotating through different departments to get a bigger perspective, or even being an understudy for a more senior role. It's really learning by doing, right in the flow of your work.
And then you have the off-the-job methods. This is probably what you picture when you hear the word training. It includes lectures and conferences, sure, but also way more interactive stuff. There's something called vestibule training, where you learn on mock equipment in a totally simulated work environment, or other simulations like case studies and role-playing.
Okay, but all of this, it costs time, it costs money. So how do we actually know if any of it was worth it? This is the million-dollar question, right? And it takes us from just collecting those little happy feedback forms to calculating cold, hard financial numbers.
So the go-to framework for this is Kirkpatrick's 4-level model. And level 1 is reaction. This is that classic happy sheet you fill out right at the end. Did you like the trainer? Was the room warm enough? It's super easy to measure, but let's be real. It tells you almost nothing about whether anyone actually learned anything.
So level 2 digs a little deeper by measuring learning. Did people actually absorb the knowledge and skills we were trying to teach? This moves beyond just feelings and into facts. We're talking about tests, quizzes, or practical exams to see if the information truly sunk in. Okay, now level 3 is where things get really interesting, because it measures behavior. Sure, they might have learned it in the classroom, but are they actually doing it back at their desk? This is way harder to track. You often need managers to observe, but it's the first real sign that the training is making a real-world impact.
And finally, the holy grail, level 4, results.
Did that change in behavior actually move the needle on key business goals? We're talking about things like increased sales, fewer errors, higher customer satisfaction. This is where you connect the learning directly to the bottom line. But even that wasn't quite enough for some. A guy named Jack Phillips came along and asked a really critical question. What about the ultimate metric, cold hard cash? He said there should be a fifth level, return on investment. Okay, let's make this super real. Imagine a vacuum company. They invest in some new product training for their sales team. A year later, they crunch the numbers and find they can attribute a $50,000 boost in gross profit directly to that training. Now they add up all the costs, developing the course, running it, even the cost of the employee's time away from selling. The question is, was it worth it?
You bet it was. The return on investment was 212.5%. For every single dollar they spent on this training, they got more than $2 back in profit. Now that is a result that gets a CEO's attention. That's the real ROI of workplace learning.
But even with an amazing ROI like that, there is one last hurdle. How do you make sure the learning actually sticks? How do you guarantee that what's learned in a course gets transferred to the real world and, stays there?
Okay, so this is fascinating. Check this out. Research shows that companies typically spend about 80% of their entire learning budget on formal, structured stuff, like the courses and workshops we've been talking about.
And this is the real kicker. The effect, the actual learning that sticks and gets applied day to day, is the complete opposite. About 80% of impactful learning happens informally. It's self-organized, it's asking a coworker for help, it's figuring out a problem on the fly. So the big takeaway is that the most powerful learning often happens outside of any classroom.
So, as we wrap this up, that leaves us with a big question to think about. Not for your company, but for you personally. What's the one skill you want to develop next? And now that you know all this, how are you going to make sure it actually sticks and becomes a real part of how you work every single day?